It goes to record, and we're going to screen share. And welcome. I'm Warren Bird, and I co-authored this project with the other leading researcher and writer on megachurches named Scott Thumma. And this is actually a survey that's done every 5 years, so it enables us to kind of follow the trends of what are happening. And we also used a lot of questions that were asked of smaller churches so that we could follow the trends size-wise. And the first observation is that large churches are growing. And, you know, in the United States, the typical church, Protestant church, 4 out of 5 are plateaued or declining. And here you have very large churches. The word megachurch is just an arbitrary word for 2,000 attendants, all physical campuses combined and higher. And they are not only growing, but at an amazingly fast rate. Anyone who says, oh, megachurches have hit their peak or they're a boomer thing is just absolutely wrong on the statistics. Now, younger large churches led by millennials and Gen Xers are actually growing to large status faster than their predecessors did. So that's one point of context. Another thing we did is we gave churches 6 choices for how do you describe your worship service. And in megachurches, the operative term was inspirational. And if you look 4 lines down, the comparison congregations, smaller than megachurches, their biggest vote was for filled with the sense of God's presence. Now, I'm not giving good or bad on that. That's just reality, but that is a difference. One more slide, and then we'll have a conversation. We asked the question, our church has a clear mission and purpose. You know, do you strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree? And of very large churches who strongly agreed, 79%. And the interesting thing to me is the comparison of that to other size churches. And again, our intent is never to put down a church of any size, any pace, any year, any place that preaches the gospel and honors our wonderful Lord. But there is a marked difference that something about size, you have much more clarity of purpose. You view yourself as more spiritually vital and alive. You 2-to-1 feel you are quite distinct, different from other congregations in the community, and very important for ongoing growth, you're willing to meet new challenges. 37% large churches, only 17% of other churches. So let me pause here. Your mics are all on. And if you have a comment or question or pushback, let's have at it.
Warren, I'll jump in. On the worship style or the description of worship as inspirational, can you unpack that phrase a little bit? Did you guys give them any parameters as to what that looked like, or did people respond to you as to what that looked like?
They self-defined. We gave them that word. It's much like happiness. I can't quite tell you what it is, but you know whether you are happy or not, or at least we assume. So we just gave them a little checklist and said, you know, rank these.
Okay.
Warren, when it says other churches on there, who is the other congregations besides the megachurch?
Size 1999 down to 50. The average church, Protestant church on Sunday draws about 86 people. So it's real easy to think, you know, in big church world and driving by big churches to forget that the typical church is quite small. In fact, once you pass 200 in worship, you are at the 80th percentile. So it's the whole spread of these churches. And by the way, not only is this report available free download at leadnet.org/megachurch, if you scroll down on that page, leadnet.org/megachurch, we profile churches 500 to 1999 just to see how they're different. And then other surveys have done smaller churches than that. Okay, Well, let's keep moving. And if you have questions, we'll pause again after a few slides. So
Okay.
if we arbitrarily divide year of founding at 1990 or earlier, you find predictably that the younger churches, look at that, 91% is their growth rate over 5 years versus 39% for those that are a little older. Those are both astounding growth rates, but especially the youngest ones. Younger churches tend to have more younger adults, and that's in part because younger churches tend to have younger pastors, and most churches roughly have their pastor, senior pastor, primary teachers age minus about 5 years. You mellow that out or mix that out by having a young teaching team. Dennis Episcopo was just saying to us as we started that he's stacking the deck with all kinds of millennial staff, and I can pretty much guarantee that means the average age of the church is going to clock down. Likewise, if your worship leaders and others are younger, that draws younger people. And so the older mega churches, have a higher percent of those in the 35 to 49 year. Their pastors have predictably been there longer. They have a little bit larger attendance. Their member involvement is virtually the same, slightly more in the older churches. And by member involvement, we had 5 standards that you give financially, you attend regularly, you lead something, you're inviting people, and I forget, you volunteer in some capacity. And the giving per capacity is higher in the established churches. Again, if you have a church of 30-somethings versus a church of 50-somethings, and they all have roughly the same percentage that actually tithe, probably your giving is going to be higher with older just because they're at the higher, a different life stage, and they have a little bit more money, and so a tithe of that money makes a difference. We've done this survey now, 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015, and look at the growth of multi-site from 23% to 62%. And then when we ask in the last surveys, are you thinking about going multi-site? A sizable chunk additionally says yes. So, and you carry that further, the larger the church, the more likely it is to be multi-site. In the 10 biggest churches, 9 of the 10 are multi-site, and actually they are going to pass what many think is the largest attendance church, Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church, where they have the 16,000 seater, and they have 4 services in it: one Saturday night, 2 Sunday morning, and then Sunday afternoon Spanish. But that still isn't the impact of having multiple campuses. So Life Church is larger. Probably Andy Stanley at North Point, Perry Noble at New Spring. We'll be passing them soon. All right, one more, this one, and then we'll pause. This is a little bit hard to understand. We asked churches, how central are small groups to your approach to Christian formation and discipleship? And 82% of megachurches gave it the highest rate. They said it's fully central. So then we took churches that say we are intentional about maximizing the number and variety of small groups, and we compared that to how many of them strongly agreed that they are a vital church, they're spiritually vital. And the clear pathway is the more you emphasize small groups, you get bigger by getting smaller. The more you interpret your congregation as being spiritually vital. So let me pause. Comments, questions, pushbacks.
That analysis, I presume, Warren, comes from the leadership of these mega churches. They're the ones making that determination, right?
Good question, Bruce. Oh, that's Tom. Sorry. And yes, this is called a key informant survey. So it's one person, typically the executive pastor, interpreting for the whole congregation, and the same with the comparison to smaller churches. And so our view is that everyone lies equally. So that the perception of all, if it's biased, it's well, for example, we've asked, what percent are new converts this year in your church versus the times we've done actual in the pew or chairs or whatever people use. survey of everybody who attends, and it's always the pastor always estimates higher for conversions than what people say. Did you come to faith in Christ in the last 12 months or whatever?
I can't believe that.
But is that a bad thing? I don't know. I think because what we expect, happens, and so if we're saying here's another person who came to faith, great, then more people will come to faith. Other questions, comments?
Hey, Warren, could you put that slide back up on the older church compared to the younger? Yeah. Now, this doesn't, I don't know if you have stats on this, but, there's giving per capita, and I get the fact that older people are going to be in a different life stage in their income, and they're probably going to be making their peak of income capabilities. But you always hear this, that it's the older generation that keeps the church afloat. It's there because they're the ones that are the faithful givers. And I really wonder about that. That's kind of a slam on younger generations, that they don't get investing in the kingdom and they don't support percentage-wise as much of the mission that older people do. And I'm not so sure that they do. They're on fixed incomes. I'm not so sure that they act so Christ-like sometimes in making sure 10% goes to the church. So I wonder if there's any studies that have been done on life stages and percentage giving.
Okay. 2 comments. Great question, Dennis. Mm-hmm. First, when I said this earlier, I just said they are at a life stage where they probably give more. I didn't say that a greater percentage of them tithe than not. But this year with our salary survey, which all your churches have been invited to, and some of your churches, I looked them up before the call, have already participated in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Those who participate not only get feedback about here to salary tables and here are the trends and all, but we're taking census data and we're going to see what generalizations we can find. So Dennis, one of the questions, so the short answer is I'm going to know that by the end of this summer, the very question you asked, because we ask every church, tell me the bulge, where's your church biggest? Is it in people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s? And then we, at another question, we ask, what is your per capita giving? Or we get the numbers to calculate it. And I'm going to correlate those two. And I'm also even going to bring in census data to say, okay, based on we ask everybody the 4 most zip codes that your people come from. I'm going to look at the household income averages because, maybe you're more from, the study is more from an affluent community than an economically challenged. So I'm going to be able to find that very thing out. I'm excited to do it. And if you haven't passed leadnet.org/salary to your numbers and stats person and salaries, please do so. You get all kinds of great feedback from us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Warren, any insight on or any thoughts from you because of your, background in working with a lot of different churches in regard to spiritual formation and Chris, you too, but when you look at what megachurches are saying about the important role of small groups, which we would concur with all this, and you compare it to, the Reveal study and the challenges that came out regarding small groups in Reveal, any insights about maybe how this relates to Reveal?
I haven't done the comparison, but I did study Reveal, and the bottom line on Reveal is, have you learned to be a self-feeder in terms of not depending on expecting your pastor, to measure up to where you are, but have you learned to ferret out the word and apply the word yourself? And small groups are the best context to do that. That's all I got on Reveal. Sorry.
All right. No, that's helpful. And actually it's helpful to hear you say how you distill that down to the bottom line, that people have become self-feeders.
Yep. And if you learn to feed yourself spiritually, and then the greater challenge is, so now you want to grow spiritually, go reproduce yourself. you give that challenge to anyone, which most of us would say that's what the Great Commission, Matthew 28, is all about. Making disciples really means making disciple makers. And 2 Timothy 2:2, train others who train others who train others who train others. Your fruit is really seen in the fruit of others. All right, we're going theology here, so I'll come back to what this shows innovative churches who also are doing online campuses. It affirms that there is a growth in online campuses. And I need to say anecdotally from a lot of people I've talked to, they say, yes, we do take a hit on Sunday morning. It's not just the family with the snotty-nosed kid that's staying home because of illness and watching online or traveling or whatever, but it's also people who don't want to fuss with our parking challenge. You find Jesus, typically in a large church, you find Jesus in the sanctuary and you lose him in the parking lot as you're waiting to get out. But a lot of people are taking the online, okay, hey, we got a lot of people listening, let's staff it with volunteers and others who can have a chat room, who can help answer questions, challenge people. In fact, online giving at online campuses is usually quite a significant piece. I inevitably, a pastor will say, I couldn't believe how much giving comes from our online campus. So just a thought. Speaking of giving, and this comes back to Dennis Episcopo's comment that somewhat, this is not age related, but the per capita does vary in churches. And the point of this slide is some people say, yeah, but if we're always focusing on all these other funds beyond our walls, doesn't it hurt our own giving as a church? No, actually the opposite, it helps. The more you give away, the higher the average per capita giving. And, the difference between $12.49 where global emphasis is just somewhat, and $1,960 where global missions is our church's specialty, is quite a bit. Now moving to ethnicity, no big surprise that multi-site churches, actually of sizes of churches, the larger you are, whether you're single site or multi-site, the more likely you are to be multi-ethnic, the more likely you are to represent your community. And if you're multi-site, it's even more so. What we don't know is, is it that this is a largely Hispanic campus and this is a largely African-American campus? Or we don't know, in a big church, are we lots of races, but the Filipino nurses, have their Bible study, and the Asians from China, they get together, and the Africans Americans, they get together. We don't know if there's segregation within the whole. We just know that large churches are definitely becoming more multiracial over time. One more, and then we'll pause for comments. Giving overall, the dollars have gone up, but if you adjust it for inflation, the actual income has remained flat. And what that means is if in the United States, among Protestants, if the average churchgoer gives 3% of their income today, then 20 years ago, the average was higher, maybe 4% or whatever. All right, questions, comments, pushback? All right, I'll keep going and you jump in at the next slot. So here's something that should concern all of you and probably is not a surprise to any of you. I grew up in an era of perfect attendance, pins where you'd go to church and see somebody who was there 52 weeks of the year. That doesn't happen anymore. Even your most committed people are there only 3 weeks out of the typical 4 in a month, which means you say, all right, we're going to take 10 minutes of Sunday service and really do this presentation big, and our core people will get it. Nope. Only about 3/4 of your core people will get it. So you have to figure out how to be purposefully redundant without boring those who are hearing something a second time. This is a trend in all sizes of churches. It's not just large churches. and it has huge implications. What about young adults, millennials, and others? Large churches do better at reaching them than any other size of church. However, large churches don't do quite as well at reaching them as they did 5 years ago. And the second half, the bottom half of this slide, is a statistical validation of something that's probably common sense. Hey, the more you emphasize young adults, the more intentional you are about reaching them, staffing them, and supporting them, the more of them you have. Now, the next one, I don't know whether this is good or bad, but it is. So let me tell you that large churches are doing less with other churches, less worship services, educational fellowship, community service. They tend to be doing more stuff just as a church. And whether that's with other churches or with other faith traditions. So let me give you one more and then we'll pause again. You saw that look at the bottom bar, if you would there, that large churches are willing to meet new challenges, 37%. And you may recall from one of the earliest slides, that's double the response level of smaller churches. However, now look at that 37% compared to what large churches said in previous years. And so it's a definite, why is that a big deal? Because while Jesus doesn't change, the Bible doesn't change, the gospel doesn't change, the fact is your neighborhood is changing. The culture around us is changing. And if you don't continually tweak how you deliver the timeless truths, you will not continue to connect with the culture at the same way. So this was just an open-ended question that says we strongly agree that we're willing to change to meet new challenges. And everybody's had that question since 2005. Comments, questions?
I just have two short things to say. First of all, on the attendance issue there, people attending less frequently. One way that's impacted us is with our capital campaigns, which seem to be in an eternal capital campaign, as most mega churches are that are growing. We do ours every 2 years, and we used to do. The trend that we're seeing is that people don't want to give pledges. That's an increasing trend. Is that people they give and they want to give and they'll give they just don't want to fill out a card. So that's going down, and yet the giving is increasing, but the amount of official pledge is less. And the second thing, but along with that, we still do ask for people to give us some idea for our planning of what they anticipate that they could contribute, but we cannot do that on 1 week. We can't say, okay, this is going to be our pledge Sunday, because of what you said, Warren. The trend is they're going to skip 2 or 3 Sundays. So we got to take those pledges over a month, or maybe 6 weeks, and we don't have pledge Sunday anymore. We have a pledge month, and you get it in at some point. Directly related to the attendance issue.
Yeah, good point.
The other thing was, it surprises me that the trend is that mega churches are not doing things with other churches.
Yeah, because you're the exception. You're doing all kinds of things with the community and other churches.
Yeah, the reason why I say that is because the millennials seem to be much more collaborative and team play than the boomers were. And I would think that would start to show a different direction as the millennials take over more in these mega churches. That's just my own read. I don't know what you think about that.
I think you're right, because millennials are cause-driven and they love that engagement with others factors. So it does not surprise me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm surprised to hear that. I think that trend has been different for us as well. And really, when I think about our efforts to reach millennials, one of the things that has changed for us is we while I think we were missionally causal anyway, but we are telling more of those stories in worship. We're reporting on more of those experiences because we really see that as part of our evangelism to millennials. And I'm curious as to other ways that you've seen worship change to communicate with and try to reach millennials.
Are you asking Dennis?
I'm asking anyone.
Dennis, give us some experiences because you're.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. What was the question?
How has worship changed in your effort to reach millennials, and especially as it relates to your missional efforts?
Well, the way we're going to do that is by getting millennials to lead the worship. So I'm strategically, very intentionally removing my boomers from the stage and giving the decision-making power on what our worship's going to look like to early 20-somethings. And that's a whole experiencing in this multi-generational church. So that's our strategy on how to do it. Frankly, we're just at the start of that. So I don't know. I don't have any advice on how that's going to all pan out. But I think the key to it being pulled off is the integrity and the character of that young leader. Our older people will follow and even stretch themselves in change. But that person leading that worship service has to, first of all, lead it. And secondly, they've got to be a high integrity person that comes out really clear whenever they open their mouth. And whenever they lead the congregation in anything, you can see Christ-likeness and high character. And I think that our people will move in that direction, but it's all going to be on the character of that young leader.
Well said. Good point. Great. All right. I'm going to keep going. We did those. We did that. We did that. Okay. Here we go. Concerns. And these I'll fly through quickly. Fewer megachurches strongly agree that they're spiritually vital and alive. That should be a big concern. Again, if people are consistent in their rating scale in their mind, the same level of optimism or pessimism, this has definitely gone down. Yet, their clarity of mission and purpose remains high. So that's a good thing. Now, I'm not picking on any of you because you're both older, but it turns out that statistics, and you are probably the exception, but after 20 years with the same pastor, that vitality rating tends to go down a little. We don't know why, we can speculate, but that's reality. And likewise, older megachurch pastors seem less open to both worship innovations, as we were discussing, so you are the exceptions, and with that sentence of our church is willing to change to meet new challenges. And we can only speculate on the reasons. Hey, we found a winning formula, or maybe the people that I'm listening to tell me everything is going great, which is why the more millennials you get in your ear and in your feedback loop, the more they'll help you understand where you do need to keep changing. The older the pastor, the more likely that pastor is to be of the church's greatest growth era. Right now, among megachurches, 82% of the pastors led the church through its greatest growth era. And that's a significant group, and predictably they're getting older. Now, for where your church is given its senior pastor age, how are you doing in terms of succession planning? Just over half say we are in good or better status, and that's helpful. The older, and this is good, the older the large church pastor, the more prepared for the eventual passing of the baton. And again, all these slides are free at leadnet.org.megachurch if you want to look at them or distribute them or do anything with it. And finally, that was finally. Let's talk about what you just heard and saw.
You need to back up about 5 slides. I need another second to look at that
Okay, going back.
incriminating evidence.
That one or one before?
One more, I think. That's the one.
So going from the top, if you've been there 30 years, 70% strongly agree the church is strong, is vital. Hey, that's a great percentage. It's higher 2 bars down. And likewise, those that agree that their church has clarity of mission and purpose, that's the lighter colored bar. It's strong, but it's much stronger for those that are in the 10 to 19 year tenure.
Sure. That's what I wanted to see. And again, the respondents to this is leadership, correct?
Yes, typically an executive pastor.
All right. Yep, that's helpful.
Wonder sometimes whether, that could be part of that could be the older you get, the more
Tired you get.
you get tired, you get cynical, you get critical and negative, and you go, look at this world. It's all, the one thing millennials don't want to hear from boomers is how terrible the world is.
Yeah.
They're very positive, and they believe that we're going to come up with a change. But more and more older pastors are saying that, it's not like it was when it's a whole different ball game. It's getting really going down the tubes. And maybe that's just part of this sense that these older pastors, as change is passing them by, and they're not keeping up with it. They go, geez, I don't know if the spiritual vitality of my congregation is what it used to be when I was in my prime.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, Warren, but I wonder if that plays into it.
Good thoughts, Dennis. Good thoughts.
Warren, you had mentioned earlier that the multi-site churches, that like Life Church is now beating Joel Osteen's church as far as size. How many multi-site churches are there? Do we know that?
Yeah, there are about 8,000 that are multi-site in some way. The vast majority are 2 campuses. Only a small percentage have been very intentional and said, let's plant additional campuses. And the 2 campus ones, more often than not, are, hey, we relocated, so let's make it a both and. Let's keep the old campus and move to the new one. Or there's a fast growing section of town, or we have a dream center that we used to call a preaching point, and now we're going to call it a campus. So not a full-fledged campus. But in terms of Leadership Network's database has about 2,000 churches that are larger and multi-site with at least 2 full campuses.
Am I correct in assuming, Warren, that the numbers are pretty much the same as they have been, with the teaching at those campuses being about 1/3 live, 1/3 video, 1/3 mixed?
Yes, that's correct. But the more campuses you have, the more likely you are to use video. And the more ethnicities that you have, the more likely you are to do in-person teaching. Mark Job in downtown Chicago, New Life, gets together on Mondays with all his campus pastors. So they plan their sermon together, some of whom deliver it in Spanish, some deliver it in English. Some of the campuses, a few of them, have video teaching in Spanish or English as spillover. So it's a delightful mix.
Mm.
Great. Well, let us tell you about 3 things that you might be aware of with Leadership Network. The first is Hub, which is, topically focused. You want to get together with churches that are really focused on leadership development or on reaching millennials, nuns in the next generation. Dennis, I think you're signed up for that, or I won't put words in your mouth. But those are options, and go to hub.leadnet.org. And our next gathering, we do this every 6 months, is April, and then the one after that is in the fall. We also are doing leader groups, what Chris is going to tell you about.
Yeah, many of you have been in the Senior Pastor 2 group, so we're opening that up now to include also executive pastors and campus pastors, and we are starting a new group with all 4 of those at the same time, but in separate locations at the same, separately, but at the same location, and that's starting up in October. So the Senior Pastor 2 is now called Senior Pastor Next Steps, and then of course Next Gen Pastors, and then Executive and Campus. So there's more specifics on that on our website if you're interested, or you want to send your campus or executive pastor as well. So,
Great.
And finally, we don't do conferences, but this is the closest thing we do to, you guys are part of the 400, and that's where we think you're high influence, high impact, high innovation, we had 5 I's that we use to single out 400 churches that we think are most significantly shaping the conversation of what God is doing going forward. We've invited all of them and their teams, and so last week you got an invitation in the mail to come to Chris Hodges' churches. If you don't know Church of the Highlands, that is just an amazing pace-setter church. Chris will address the group, as will some of the other pastors present, but it's largely a connect with others, and we're going to structure it. Hey, people who want to talk about, culture of generosity, go over here right now. Senior pastors, let's get you together for lunch over here, by different criteria. So you just are going to come home with a lot of new friends and a lot of new ideas. And that's in September, and we warmly invite you to come.
and like Warren said, if you should have an invitation that they sent via the post office, and if you don't have one, let me know, because I can send it to you digitally, and then also that you see there where you can find out more information. And there's a nice early bird discount that ends at the end of March, so be sure and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And to track with us, there's this at Warren Bird, at 511 Coach, and at LeadNet, and
Great.
Leadership Network Advance.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate this opportunity to get to hear from you, Warren. I'd read the study, but it was helpful for me to get to hear. And Chris, good to see you again too. Gentlemen, nice to meet you.
Always great to connect. Thanks so much. God bless.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, great to see you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.